Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that everyone's had a wonderful last couple of days. I hope you got a nice relaxing Sunday in. I know I sure did. And I hope that you guys have been safe, that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours when it comes to news, especially inside of Ukraine, but all over the world. And unfortunately, when it comes to this news in general, there's just not a lot of good stuff. It's usually a lot of rather kind of depressing topics, whether you're talking about the war in Ukraine, whether you're talking about different natural disasters ongoing, deaths of very famous and influential individuals of our time, terrorism, drought and famine and climate change and all sorts of stuff. It's generally speaking kind of bad, isn't it? It's kind of depressing to kind of listen to on the news every single day. But luckily, here at the New News, we're able to be the news that gives back. And the way that we're able to do that is actually through you guys as the community. And the way that this works is if you check out in the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links. Please go and check them all out, not just the ones in Ukraine, though please give a lot of support to them, but also other places too, whether you're talking about Southeast Asia or you're talking about ongoing stuff with the Horn of Africa with the severe droughts and famines ongoing there. Please give as much support as you can to these organizations. They could really use your help. They're trying to do a lot of good in the world, and there is a lot of good that needs to be done to really rectify a lot of these situations. But that's the goal of this. We are 100% a charity-driven news organization. 100% of everything that we do is for charity. We will never be doing super chats on the channel. We'll never be pushing any kind of merchandising. 100% of everything we do here will be to support charities and will be always to help people throughout the world. I'm never planning on making a cent off of this YouTube channel. So please, if you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay too. Please give a like and subscribe and let your friends know about us. The more people that come here and watch the news, the more of an impact we will have overall, and the more good we'll be able to do throughout the world. And with that, before we jump right into the news here, please feel free to ask questions. I will be very willing. I am watching the chat. I'm very willing to answer your questions and comments that you have throughout the stream if you're joining us live tonight. I am an 0352 anti-tank missileman. I served in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I did 2 tours to the Middle East with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, Weapons Company, and I went to Syria for 4.5 months, plus another month and a half I spent in Kuwait during my first tour. And then during my second tour, I was one of the 100 Marines that went to the Baghdad Embassy compound on New Year's of 2020 to respond to the crisis there, where I oversaw anti-armor operations through the entire Baghdad Embassy complex. And then on top of that, I also trained Saudi Arabian Marines going into Yemen. And I also spent time in Kuwait as well, of course, where I was with the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. So please feel free to ask questions. My subject matter expertise are in anti-armor warfare and also into armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner and rifleman, of course. And then if you have any other questions outside of those realms, I will try to answer them to the best of my ability, but to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in everything. So I'd like to consider myself well-versed, but if I don't know, I just will answer as such, or at least give you the best answer that I can. The fact of the matter is that nobody can be an expert on everything, and I always implore you, no matter what, expert or not, that you do your own research. It's very important you don't believe everything on the internet. Oman, you mentioned Yemen. No, Zach Jeffers says, Oman, you mentioned Yemen. Yes, Yemen. Oh. He's doing geography puns. Sorry, I don't take on social cues very well. Very well. But with that, we begin our journey into the news here. And we start off in the country of Ukraine, of course, with our special report. And we actually start off here in Kyiv, where we get, of course, our daily updates and some news coming out of the capital of the country. First of all, we get a child casualty update. Once again, a rather horrendous update and statistic that we have to give, but it is an important one to note. And this comes to us from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine, and they said that, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 390 Ukrainian children have died, 757 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, and that does make sense. Some of the heaviest fighting in the war has been ongoing in the Donetsk region. It's very bitter fighting. We've seen entire towns completely leveled. Case in point, the village of Pisky, which is completely destroyed. But yes, that is something that we do see pretty often there, and is some of the most bitter fighting of the war. However, it's not all bad today. We have some good news coming out today. The SARS-CoV-2 vaccine was delivered to Ukraine today. 400,000 doses in total of the mRNA vaccine against COVID. Developed by Pfizer and BioNTech. They were delivered to Ukraine under the framework of the COVAX initiative. The vaccines will be distributed throughout the 23 regions in the country by the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. If you want to get more on that, you can check out the WHO's official website regarding that delivery. But it's good to see that they are getting necessary things in there, and COVID being such a big problem throughout the entirety of the world, it's good to see that they're getting this, as this is an area that may be a little bit overlooked considering everything else kind of going on. It's good to see that those are also coming in. We're also seeing a lot more aid for Ukraine coming in today. This is actually coming from the Ministry of, we have a couple different sources here, but the Ministry of Defense for Ukraine, but also with Ilya Ponomarenko, who is an independent reporter with the Kyiv Independent. And what we see here is that 2 additional M270 Mars 2 MLRS systems, which are essentially an older variant of the HIMARS. It's tracked. It also has a larger ammunition capacity, but they fire the same munitions. But it's very similar to the HIMARS. They kind of get wrapped up all into one. But the M270 Mars 2 system, as well as 4 new PHZ 2000 155mm self-propelled guns. These are basically German variants of the M109 Paladin, which is the self-propelled I say self-propelled. Think of a tank with an artillery gun on it. It's not a tank, but it is on the chassis of a tank, essentially. It has tracks, and it has a giant 155mm artillery gun, and a howitzer, and it fires as artillery while on a tank chassis. That's kind of what they're getting. They're getting those. They're getting 4 more of them. Keep in mind that all of this stuff is very valuable. The PHZ-2, first of all, the Mars 2 system is really allowing for a lot of these advantages that Ukraine is receiving. It's really setting the stage for how it's shaping the battlefield. The bridges that were destroyed across the Dnipro River, those are HIMARS and Mars 2s. All the ammunition depots that have been destroyed, those are HIMARS and Mars 2 systems, the majority of them. Headquarters, key targets, key infrastructure, all this stuff is Mars 2s and HIMARS systems. PHZ 2000s, these are highly mobile artillery platforms. They can set up gun batteries much quicker than towed artillery. They literally can set up and fire. It's no problem. It's very quick, and they can instantly displace. And basically all NATO artillery systems outrange Russian systems by at a minimum of about 5 kilometers or more, meaning Russian forces, in order to just counter battery fire these systems, they have to get within about 5 kilometers within the range of these systems just to counter battery at all, putting them well within the max effective range of these artillery systems, especially, and it's even can be extended even further than that 5 kilometers depending on the munitions used, such as for, say, the Excalibur round, which is much further. It's a rocket-assisted precision-guided munition for the 155 howitzer. But not only this, they're also getting 50 Dingo MRAPs. They call them armored personnel carriers. It is technically true, but they're MRAPs. So they are MRAPs. I believe this is coming from the Netherlands, if I can remember the flag correctly. So it's really adding to that equipment pool that they're getting of NATO equipment. But on top of this, Slovenia is reportedly going to be giving Ukraine 28 M55 S1s. Now, the M55 S1 is a T-55 tank. Now, the T-55 tank is older than anything else that we have seen in the duration of this war, minus the T-34 we saw over by Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. But the T-55 while completely outdated, is not what Ukraine is receiving. They're getting the M55S1. And the M55S1 is very unique. Slovenia did a ton of upgrades. They took they took the T-55, one of the most outdated tanks. I didn't even know that there were still a whole lot of them around to be used. Most of them were destroyed in Iraq. But they take the T-55, and what it is it has improved armor. They replaced the 100mm smoothbore main gun with a 105mm rifled gun. And the M55S is now, the T-55 is not explosive reactive armor compatible. The M55S is. It has an upgraded engine, bringing it up by about 300 horsepower, which gives it a much better gear ratio for the weight of the tank versus the propulsion system on the tank. It also has improved optical gun sights. It's got laser detection systems to detect incoming rockets and artillery fire and everything else, incoming projectiles. It can be switched from automatic and manual gun modes, meaning that it can have an automatic rotating turret with up to 9 rounds a minute, or it can have a manual fire mode similar to the Abrams tanks. They have thermal and night vision optics, as well as day view optics. It has a computerized fire control subsystem, meaning that it increases its first round hit probability, which is exactly the same kind of thing that the Abrams tanks and the Leopards tanks and the Challenger tanks all utilize, these computerized fire control subsystems. It does the math for the gunner, and it means that they are able to put these rounds on target at a further distance, all on the move or on a stationary target, and it's probably going to hit the first time. This tank is a T-55 in name alone. It has the same layout to the T-55, but overall, they took a T-55 chassis, stripped it down to its bare bone basics, and then they completely built what essentially is a new tank on top of it. It is very, very impressive, and it's all done with parts from Israel and European countries, NATO countries. It's taking a T-55 tank, one of the worst tanks you could ever use, and it's taking it to the point that you're making it as close to the Abrams as physically possible. Well, the Abrams or the Leopard, pick your choice of Western main battle tanks. The Leclerc, if you're French. And it's taking it and it's making it as close to this as possible. But we can see here, this is the M270 Mars 2 system that we see on top. And this is coming from Alexei Reznikov, who is the Minister of Defense of Ukraine. So that is the M270 Mars 2 system. That is the PHC 2000. And that is a Dingo. But we can also see here from Ilya Ponomarenko, this beast, and you can kind of see it, but not really. You can see it especially if you know the road wheels really well. This is a T-55, but this is the M55S. This is the M55S1 specifically. And you would be questioning yourself if you ever see this in person and you're trying to ID it on the battlefield. You can see just the upgrades. The suspension system and the chassis remain the same, minus the engine components, but the T-55 is very easy to point out because it normally has a bore evacuator on the tip. We see here's a non-concentric bore evacuator, something that's very notable on non-NATO vehicles, or on NATO vehicles, that they have a non-concentric bore evacuator in its rear center of the forward line. This is a thermal cooling sleeve on the barrel as well, which is amazing. This is also a rifled barrel as opposed to smooth bore. Of course, it's an upgraded one. You can see just the immense amount of optics, smoke screen systems, improved armor all around. They have improved armor all around the vehicle, and this doesn't include the ERA setups that they can do on this. So it's very impressive. It's about as close. You can see this is actually a windage sight here. This is a windage system, and it also plays into the laser detection system. So it's insane for a T-55 tank. It is not a T-55 tank. It really isn't. It's a T-55 chassis, and it's a completely different tank aside from it. It's very impressive what Slovenia did with that. I have never seen it in person, but I've read about it, and it's very, very impressive what they have done with it. It is a completely different tank than what you would normally see fielded. Meanwhile, Russia's fielding T-62 tanks, the next tank in the T series, and they're fielding them bare bones. They do not have any upgrades or modernizations done to them. However, we go back to a little bit of more somber news as we take a look here. And 10 million tons. Quote, the Ukraine has lost up to 10 million tons of potential harvest in 2022 due to the occupation of territories. And that's coming from Tarasa Vasytsky, the first deputy minister of agrarian policy and food. So we do know that the war, of course, is taking a toll on agriculture. We've seen that pretty heavily already throughout the duration of this war, as we're talking about just getting last year's grain out of the country. And what we see is that these farmers aren't farming right now. There are some farmers that are out there, they're collecting grain, they're doing what they normally would do. But really what you're seeing is these farmers are on the front lines. They're fighting in a war. They are in an occupied area, and their grain, their harvests are being stolen by the Russians and have been for some time. These are not, they're losing an immense amount, 10 million tons. And when they say million tons, it's metric tons. This is metric tons in Ukraine. This isn't just a ton. It's a metric ton that's meant for shipment. It's an immense amount. It's immense volume that is being taken. You got to think some of these ships that are loading up for the grain corridor are taking on 30,000 metric tons. They're losing out 10 million. So that's a huge harvest. That's a huge profit. That's a lot of problems right there. As we jump over here into the Kharkiv Oblast, we start to get really into the war itself. And what we start seeing here is that it's non-stop shelling that has continued here in the Kharkiv Oblast. Quote, in the last 24 hours, Russian occupiers shelled the Kharkiv region. 2 women were killed, 11 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings were damaged. This is coming from Oleg Subanov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. That does not improve as we continue, as the war crimes also continued here. And so far, as they are going through these liberated territories of the Kharkiv Oblast, we're seeing that, quote, the Ukrainian law enforcement officers have already registered 241 war crimes committed by Russian troops in the liberated settlements of the Kharkiv region. That's coming from the press service of the Kharkiv Regional Police. Quite an immense amount of war crimes. Pretty terrible. And you're not even, each individual one of these of the bodies from the mass graves could be considered in their own right a war crime. We've heard at this point of entire families being buried there. Upwards of 6 people in a family just wiped out. In one foul swoop, wiped off the face of the earth here in Izium. And that work does also continue. Quote, 146 bodies of the dead have already been exhumed from the mass burial site in Izium, liberated from the Russian occupiers. The vast majority of them are civilians, including 2 children. The exhumation is ongoing. Earlier burials of about 450 bodies were found in the forest strip near the deoccupied town of Izium. And that's coming from Oleg Sunugov, who's the head of that's once again coming from Oleg Sununov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Delta Aviation asks, what is your opinion on the capture of a T-90M? I will get to that. We have that. We do have that. I will get to that, and I'll answer that question when we get to it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer it here, but I will answer it when we get to it because that is very important to note. So keep that in the back of your mind if you are watching. There was a T-90M that was captured, and it really should tell you quite significantly kind of where the Russian mindset is here. But we will get to that. But we do know that Ukrainian troops are on the move. They are continuing, especially we see a lot of movements all across the front, all throughout the Donbass, as counteroffensives, both big and small, are currently ongoing throughout the entirety of Ukraine right now. But what we do see is, and we kind of pushed it here over to the Kharkiv Oblast because we do know that that is where the majority of movement is ongoing right now. But they are on the move. They continue to push forward, and we're seeing Ukrainian forces pretty much repeating this scene over and over again across the country as they're going out in very large formations as they're heading out to the front. And you got to think, most of these guys, they're hiking a pretty good distance with these. These armies, on average, will make about 20 miles a day or 20 kilometers a day-ish. 20 to 25 kilometers a day. They have captured, it took them a week to capture 6,000 kilometers. So they are very, very fast moving, despite what we see a lot of throughout this war, which is a lot of walking and hiking and static defensive warfare. Reportedly, at this point, there is reported fighting near Kryvyi Yar. Pretty fierce battles outside of the village. We do not know what exactly the situation is at this point. We're waiting to get some more clarity. But if you can take a look here, reportedly Russian troops are still in Oskil, here at the tip of the Oskil River, before it runs into Seversky Donetsk. And what we're seeing is that at this point, if there is fighting in this area, it means that the Russians are currently being encircled here. So that is pretty fair. It also puts pressure here over by Lyman, which we already know there's offensive operations there, and it's quickly putting pressure over here all the way up to Kremina, depending on the stiffness of their defense. Most of the Russians, their defense in depth, which is kind of the defensive method for modern warfare, pretty much completely collapsed already. So any defensive networks that they had that were firmly in place or have already been overrun, and any defensive networks that they have now are pretty new. They're still in development, and they're not really as well entrenched as they were prior to this counteroffensive. But we do know that there have been some significant changes in the battle space here. Russian military base was destroyed here over in Zvatove, and this is coming from Sergei Haida, who's the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration. And he says that, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian military base in the city of Zvatove in the Luhansk region on September the 18th, so yesterday. So very successful strike. This will limit Russian command and control, as well as communications infrastructure here, as well as likely logistical too. We can assume that there was a logistical capabilities there that have now been significantly degraded as it has all suddenly combusted. And as we jump down here, we continue here into the Luhansk Oblast, where we actually see Ukrainian forces have officially declared Bilohorivka, which we have suspected of being liberated. They have officially liberated it. They have said that they have liberated it. That we also get that from Sergei Haida, who is the head of the Donetsk, or of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration. He says, quote, a village of Bilohorivka in the Luhansk region was liberated by the armed forces of Ukraine. But we also see Ukrainian troops on the move throughout Bilohorivka, which is seeing some pretty bitter fighting throughout the duration of the war. If you may remember, this is a point in which Russian forces were completely demolished and trying to pontoon their way across the bridge, and Ukrainian artillery really rained down and destroyed what was suspected an entire BTG, Battalion Tactical Group of Russian forces here. This is during the Battle of Lysychansk to Severodonetsk. They have recaptured this territory. So we do know that this is a very strategic location, and really we're starting to see pressure on both sides of the Seversky Donetsk River and on the Oskil rivers, really meaning that there is a lot of pressure on the Russian forces on their flank and on their rear at this point, as they are trying to worry about whether or not they're going to be enveloped and they're going to be encircled, or also kind of once you collapse the flanks, the center force usually is going to be bound to collapse because they have to reconsolidate their position. So we're really seeing a lot of pressure on the Russians. It's very accurate pressure, and and it's very impressive what the Ukrainian forces are doing right now, of shaping this battle space as they have been for the last couple of weeks. It's been amazing to see, and we can see just the successes as we're looking here and the amount of liberated territories we've been seeing. Take a look. So these are Ukrainian forces. They are going through. This is in Bilohorivka. Very short video, but we also have another one where we can see them moving once again. This is coming from some of the armored forces here as they're pushing through Bilohorivka. You see just the amount of destruction. I mean, there is not a single point in this war at this point where you're looking forward, right? You're driving through these towns and it's just rubble. There's not a town untouched by this war. And it is just rubble everywhere. Every house, every warehouse, there's just blown up cars and houses and buildings everywhere. There's no good living conditions in Ukraine anymore. It's just going to have to all be rebuilt essentially from the ground up. But that is Ukrainian forces. They're on the move through Bilorivka. And as that is happening, it would appear that Ukrainian forces are already knocking on the doorsteps of Lysychansk. We see some footage coming out today. You may have already seen it if you've been following the war rather closely, of a Russian T-72 B-3, which was actually hit with an anti-tank guided missile on the outskirts, one of the ridges overlooking the plains coming up to Lysychansk. So we actually do know that they are knocking on the doorstep of Lysychansk at this point. Ukrainian forces are already putting pressure on those very recently captured, rather major cities here in the Luhansk Oblast. So that's a very good sign that they're making good progress. But just take a look at this. This is T-72 B-3. It's firing down on Ukrainian troops there. You can see this is the open fields I was talking about. You can see they're on this ridge line. They're opening fire. He's going to push forward here. And you see that he takes a hit from an anti-tank guided missile. And he immediately realizes his egregious error and begins to back up. Immediately. And yes, it was an anti-tank guided missile. I'm really impressed that it didn't completely just knock out this tank. I don't know if it hit something and it just didn't get a catastrophic destruction. That is perfectly fine. That can happen very easily. You're not as cool as it is to watch tank turrets fly 200 feet in the air. It's not all the time. Most tanks are going to get knocked out, and they're going to be repairable, actually. And that's something that you see throughout history when it comes to mechanized armored warfare. So it's just, you're not going to get the pretty explosion every time, guys, unfortunately. But they did take a good hit from an ATGM, it would seem. As we come down here, we start taking a look at Kramatorsk, and it's over here in Kramatorsk where we see that it's been shelled once again. So the city of Kramatorsk is constantly getting shelled by Russian forces. They're somewhere up here, kind of in the Lyman area, just across the Siversky Donetsk River. And they're shelling this area because for them, this is supposed to be an area where they're supposed to be conducting offensive operations. You see, Kramatorsk and Slavyansk before it lie along a Russian axis of advance. The idea is that you conduct a wide encirclement movement. The first pincer movement comes from here, kind of in the Bakhmut Solidar area. It kind of works its way over. You could also hit Toretsk and Kostanivka down here in the south. But then from the north, you have Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, and you do this wide envelopment here, and it cuts off Ukrainian forces here in the center, and they become encircled. But that's kind of what we're seeing here. But they can't launch these offensives anymore. Nonetheless, they continue to shell, and most of the time, these are just hitting civilian places. But this local hotel was hit, and it injured one person that we know of. This is coming from Pavel Korolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Take a look. Going back a little bit, So Demise FBS asked if that shot, that ATGM, was a Javelin or a Stugna, in reference to the Stugna P. It's not a Javelin. It is not a Javelin missile. It does not look like a Javelin at all. Now, that being said, there are other rocket systems. There are other ATGMs. So, your Sideburn, the Rooster Sideburns, who's in the chat, also believes this is Stugna. So the Stugna P it was originally destined to go to Arab countries. It's Ukrainian domestically made, but they were meant to go to Arab countries as an export, and then the war kicked off. So that's why whenever you see Stugna Ps, they're all in Arabic. But I don't know what the munition for the Stugna P looks like, so I can't tell you. I do know that there are other ATGMs that look rather similar to this when fired. One of them would be, you got to remember, there's also the Cornet system. You also have the Concours system. Both of those are Soviet and Russian. You also have the In-Law, which would have a medium range. It could be a medium range fired ATGM, which would still be about this size, at least judging from the distance. This is not a tow missile. I do not believe this is a tow missile. Based off the look, the fins are way too big. But it's really hard to determine. I do not believe it's a NATO system. From the look of it, it's either Russian or it's domestic. So that's my input on that. But it's not a good enough picture to tell you. Also, my personal bias says that if it was a NATO system, that turret would have flown. We also get the daily Donetsk update. We got one of them officially released as like the official quote, but we do have both of them based off of Pavel Korolenko's Twitter. And he said, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles on the Donetsk region on September the 17th. 5 people were killed, 18 citizens were injured. And we get that in his first update here. Keep in mind, this is 24 hours after the fact. So he's reporting this the next morning after that day is over at 8 a.m. local time on the next day. So right now, quite an immense amount of people. 5 killed, 18 injured. And he listed even the names. So he's talking Kramatorsk, Zakitne, Bakhmut, Kostanivka. He's covering all of this. But on yesterday, he says, according to September the 18th, 3 people were killed and 8 were injured as well. And as we move over here and into Bakhmut, we continue to see Russian forces at least attempting some offensive actions of some sort. We do not see a lot of ground push or ground successes, but what we do see is the frustration starting to breathe through once again. If you remember during the Battle of the Azovstal, the Russians actually filmed themselves on Ria Novosti and advertised it to the world that they were committing war crimes by using incendiary munitions. That's a war crime for 2 reasons. The reason one is it breaks rule, I believe it's number 85 of the customary international humanitarian law, which means that you cannot use incendiary munitions against personnel. So you can't purposely use incendiary munitions against personnel. This is why you can't drop white phosphorus or Willy Pete onto people. Even if it's a smoke screen, you can't just drop it onto people. That's a war crime. It's also called a shake and bake if you're doing it right. But you do see them using it. It also breaks it for the second reason being that they used it there at the Azovstal. Mariupol is a highly concentrated civilian population. Using incendiary munitions inside of a highly concentrated civilian population actually breaks Protocol 3 of the Geneva Conventions, the 1949 convention specifically. The Protocol 3 was adopted in 1980, and that is the usage of incendiary munitions inside of civilian populations. That is kind of why that breaks it. Mariupol, civilian population. And so it's quite extensive. They aired it And we're seeing them do it again, is basically what I'm getting to here. The evidence is very clear on the incendiary munitions usage, similar to that here. This is a city here located in the Donbass, or near Bakhmut. And what we're seeing is, you see that? You see that? That's either white phosphorus or thermite. I do not know which one, but that's just burning. It's a chemical reaction. Which means that thing, there's nothing you can do to put that out. The only way that stops is if it is once the chemical reaction has finished. It's the only way that these thermal munitions stop. There is no putting these things out. Okay, and that's why it just keeps burning. And you can see it's burning this white, bright white hot there. Yeah, this is key signature of thermal munitions. And he grabs a stick, and he goes over here to this next one. Sorry, the quality's a little bad on this video, but he goes over here to this next little compound, and you can see once again, you see the chemical reaction's almost completed on this one. It's almost finished. And he grabs a stick, and yeah, look at that. It still lights it on fire. And look, that's a car. Like, this is a village. There's houses. There's a house. There's a house. There's a house across the street. This is a village. This is once again a civilian area. A civilian area. Look at all those garages. This is not a military target. So, this is in and of itself a massive war crime. Like, there are people in Fort Leavenworth right now for doing stuff like this. For life. They did a thing called a shake and bake in Afghanistan. It's where you drop high explosive mortar or artillery rounds on somebody, and then you drop Willie Pete, which is white phosphorus. And it creates a smoke screen. We still use it to create smoke because it creates a very thick white smoke. And they drop it on top, and they dropped it on top of people. You shake them up with HE, and then you bake them with white phosphorus. It's literally a term for it. It's straight up a war crime. You don't burn people alive in war. There's a limit. There's a reason why war has these rules. Because I don't know if no one probably remembers this, but burning people alive is kind of frowned upon. Even in war, it's horrendous. It's a horrendous way to die. It's absolutely in the smell. Oh my God, the smell it's awful, but it's just inhumane. It's very inhumane. Demise FPS says, I can't imagine that shit falling on somebody. Yeah, they die. I mean, it burns through you. It's hotter than napalm. And napalm sticks to you. Because it's just a petroleum jelly, essentially, that ignites. But it's awful. And they're using it on civilian areas. You know somebody has to have been injured with these thermite munitions. I mean, their houses are burned down. Like, somebody was in these things. People have been injured doing this, without a doubt, in my mind. It's not the only thing. Bakhmut still receives merciless shelling itself. Bakhmut here, they're leveling entire apartment complexes, and it's caught on drone footage. They are quite literally going block by block. These are apartment buildings. The Russians are quite literally, with Bakhmut, going block by block, leveling it, similarly how they did it with Lysychansk and Mariupol. At this point, Bakhmut has held out for so long against the Russian forces. We're going on several months now. They are getting tired of it, and they are leveling it block by block with artillery. They are just wiping it off the face of the earth if they can, and that's really what we're seeing here. This is some drone footage coming from Bakhmut of a Russian artillery barrage here on some apartment complexes. And you can see the artillery coming in here. I mean, they've just completely demolished these. Completely demolished them. Bruce Cyber says that this is what they mean by saving them. Yeah, they call this liberation. Liberation from life, maybe. We do know that the Russian forces are pushing more men to the front lines. We see what appears to be that Katorovite division that we had seen earlier. They appear to have been conducting some more movements, and they're moving their way to the front. Really, what we're expecting is that these guys are going to be reinforcing forces that are already there on the front line and kind of replenishing them a little bit, because we do know that the situation for them defensively has degraded across the entirety of Ukraine. The situation in the Kharkiv Oblast really resonated and really kind of shook the rest of the forces to the core. There are huge morale loss there. And this is coming on top of huge mounting losses. Reports coming in now are saying that the entire brand new core of forces, the brand new division that they formed in Russia, it has been brought into Ukraine and already suffered upwards of like 80% casualties or something like that. It is just the entire, like, they spent months getting all of this equipment and building a brand new core and making brand new invasion signals, and then went to Ukraine and their brand new toy just got completely pulverized in about 3 days. This is a meat grinder. This is a war of attrition. This is a bloodfest. This is just the bloodiest, bitter fighting that has been seen on this earth in quite some time. It is absolutely horrendous. It is a meat grinder. It is absolutely, it's incomprehensible. Even if you have gone to a war zone yourself before, if you've gone to any of these active war zones, if you're a veteran, this war is nothing like the wars on terror. It's nothing like the invasion of Iraq. It is nothing like that. Those are an absolute cakewalk compared to this war. The kinetic intensity of this has not been seen truly since World War II. Demai says the third army suffered 80% casualties. There are rumors of another army corps being formed as the 4th Army Corps. Yes, but we do know that the 3rd Army, which is what they formed, that new corps that they formed in Russia of volunteer battalions, we do know that one was already under strength. So we do know that when they went into Ukraine, they were already considered under strength. 3rd Army Corps for the Russian Federation, which is not saying much because, generally speaking, their small units are generally smaller than NATO forces are, but their larger units encompass much more. Their BTGs are much more battalion. They call them battalion tactical groups. A battalion in like the Marine Corps is like 1,500 Marines, 2,000 Marines, something like that. Russia's BTGs are like 10,000 troops. It's an insane number. But we do see the Katovites are headed to that front line here. Take a look. You can see there's their little kitchen, their little cook kitchen there. These guys actually got one. I'm surprised. They probably dug that one out of like the old Soviet war chest there. I'm really curious what they have sticking out the back. You can see some of these command and control vehicles, fuel vehicles, recovery, munitions, water munitions, troops, medical troops. Little Toyota. I don't think this is a Toyota Hilux. I think this is whatever Lada produces that's knockoff Toyota Hilux. But you can see they're just half their stuff is civilian vehicles. Is that a technical? Bet your ass it is. Not that you could use the gun in any of these because it's so filled with shit in the back. But the Russians are just really trying whatever they can do to really reinforce their troops at the front, and it's not working in their favor. It's not working in their favor. They're just these troops, because these think these guys aren't even really mechanized. The entire Russian army is mechanized. These guys, I think, are the first really what I would consider motorized brigade. But they're an infantry brigade. I mean, these guys really don't have as much armor and artillery and everything. We just keep getting pumped into this war. They are really, really scraping the bottom of the barrel and sending with whatever they can. I mean, they're pulling trucks off of guys' lots, and they're just shoving them into this war. They're taking spray paint, painting them olive drab, and saying, "Have fun, guys." Mounting some dishkas to them. That's bad. That's not a good sign. See signal flares being fired over the city of Donetsk. We're not quite sure what the situation for that is. These are just signal flares. They're not anything crazy. I'm not quite understanding. I can kind of understand, but I don't at the same time. When I was in Syria, we would pretty much at random at like 3 a.m.-ish, usually, just kind of on a random, they'd just be like, that day, and they just randomly fire some mortars over the city of Ashdodi. And you'd be like, why? Because they're 120 millimeter mortars, and they're just firing flare rounds over the city, and it's like a show of force. The whole point is to change up and make people wonder what you're doing and why you're doing it all the time. And I'm pretty sure that's what could be the Russians are doing here.
Что это такое? Что это?
By the way, I feel sorry for whoever is just trying to sleep peacefully in that apartment right there. Like, you thought your neighbor shining their headlights through your bedroom window at night was bad? This poor guy got a whole signal flare. That thing's damn near blinds you. Those things burn very bright. And right now, the DNR head, Denis Pishlin, is calls the LNR head to create an initiative to immediately hold a referendum to recognizing them as subjects of the Russian Federation. So, according to Sergei Haida, who's the head of the Luhansk Oblast military administration, he said that, quote, the organization of a Russian referendum in the newly occupied territories of Luhansk is necessary to announce a general mobilization in Russia. The reason being that he would be doing this, or that they would be doing this, is basically it's trying to expedite what happened to Crimea. Crimea got annexed as a Russian. Now it's considered by Russia a Russian territory. So if anyone invades Crimea, that's an attack on Russia, and therefore the Russian Federation can do a general mobilization and actually declare war. If Donetsk and Luhansk hold a pseudo-referendum that Russia then recognizes, that officially means that, in Russia's mind anyway, that the Luhansk and Donetsk regions are Russian. They are Russia, the part of the Russian Federation, in true. Meaning that this goes from being a special military operation for the Russian Federation into a full-on war, in which case they can go ahead and mobilize their population behind it, which really makes up for manpower shortages. Which is what the Russians are really suffering from on the front lines. They're having a terrible manpower shortage. And that means that Russia can commit everything they have, and they can turn their entire industry away from peacetime production into a wartime mode, because the Russian State Duma can now say, Putin technically can now say that Ukraine is attacking Russian soil. Which isn't true. But that's the idea. That's the ideology behind it. And you got to think like Putin if you're trying to figure out what the hell is happening in Ukraine for the Russians. Anyway, here's that phone call.
Добрый вечер, уважаемый Леонид Иванович. Звоню по какому вопросу?
Нам сегодня поступили обращения от общественных палат, а это не что иное, как раз отображение мнения наших людей, которые давно витает в воздухе. И я считаю, нам в некоторые моменты нужно подготовить совместно, некоторые действия нужно синхронизировать. И хотелось бы что проговорить. У меня предложение объединить усилия сейчас администрации, глав республик, аппараты парламентов, для того, чтобы они выработали те шаги, тот алгоритм действий, который позволит начать вопрос подготовки к референдуму.
So they're going to make a referendum, and they're going to do it to become. And so they're trying to coordinate a referendum together to basically join the Russian Federation as not independent countries now, but as part of Russia. That is the goal. That is what that phone call is about. This is not about, once again, as has been stated very clearly before, this is not about, preventing genocide for the Russians. There isn't a genocide. We know there's not a genocide. We're very clear about the fact that there's not a genocide. The satellite imagery alone tells you that there's not a genocide, because all this is pre-war. All this has been since 2000 or pre-February. So there is no sign of genocide when it comes to the Donbass against Russian-speaking peoples. You want to know what one of the largest Russian-speaking populations in the Donbass was? Mariupol. For those that don't know, that city that Russia bombed off the face of the earth, mostly Russian-speaking people. So, but that's what the Donetsk and Luhansk are trying to do. This is not about a genocide. This is not about protecting people. This is not about a peacekeeping mission. This is not about overthrowing Nazis. This is not about anything. This is about expanding Russia's borders. This is about Russian imperialism. Because parts of Ukraine, such as Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, parts of, pretty much all Belarus, parts of Poland, the Baltics, parts of Finland, you know where all these used to be under? Imperial Russia during the time of the Tsar. That's what all these territories are. Control the Caucasus. Control all of this. This is all Russian imperialism ambitions. This isn't Soviet. Soviet Union maintained that Ukraine was its own republic and that it just was a puppet state, kind of like what Belarus is now. Same thing with all these countries. And Poland, well, they were just jointly invaded by the Soviet Union and the Nazis. Pretty much the same thing is happening, but it's not the same thing. Sorry, it's not the same thing. This is just Russia taking them over and declaring them Russia. That's imperialism. That's neo-imperialism at its finest. Large explosion was seen over Dokuchevsk, which is over here to the south of Donetsk. Not quite sure what the target or the casualties are at this point, but it was pretty significant. Something else notable here in the Donetsk Oblast. We're not quite sure exactly where this is, but Katerina Berdy Polishuk from the Azovstal is confirmed to be alive at this point. They keep claiming that she was a sniper, even though it's pretty well known that she was a medic. Man, there is actual footage of her. Yeah. So, she's alive. Very important to note that, considering how many of the thousand members of the Azov battalion that was left at the Azovstal, how many of them do we know are still alive? Well, we know a bunch of them burned alive in Olenivka. So, it's a pretty important question. I definitely feel like there's probably some less than Geneva Convention friendly things happening to prisoners on the Russian side. I mean, we see what they do to civilians. Can you imagine prisoners of war? I can't. Here we have some more first-person view footage coming out of the war in Ukraine, and what we see here is that it's more live footage from Ukrainian troops that are engaging Russian forces in close quarters fighting here in the Donbass. Just take a look.
Подожди! Отстать! Отстать! Все, стоять! Стреляй по нем нахуй! Бодя, дальше отойди, блядь! Сука! Тихо, ты там бегай по хате! Ну он нахуй этого долбоёба! Попал? Красавчик!
Хату? Попал?
Куда не побег, кто попал? Куда побег?
Он вперед, вдоль дома побежал.
Давай! Огонь! Давай, хуярь! БК, блядь, храни трошки, ебать! Замес нахуй! Все, хватит нахуй.
Them two boys really laying down that heat with the M16s back there. And so as a little bit of a breakdown as to what's happening here. So they're yelling at the Russians, telling them like, "Hey, this guy's getting ready to fire a rocket," and these guys are like, "Hey, like surrender, just surrender," and then they get opened up on. So this guy starts running back because he's the one that's yelling. He starts running back. He's finding cover. And these guys move back to get out of the guy who's crouching up ahead of him. Since he's got the rocket, they're getting out of his back blast. And he fires that rocket, and he just chucks the empty tube. And what they do is, you can see, he just starts laying down a burst fire on this M16. You can see the reason why him and this guy are laying down burst fire is because they're trying to get what's called fire superiority. If you throw more bullets back at the enemy than what they're throwing at you, generally speaking, they stop shooting at you. Oddly enough, they don't want to pop their heads up and get hit. So it's getting fire superiority. You want to put more fire downrange than what you're taking, and that suppresses your enemy, and then you can start putting accurate fire onto your target. But that's kind of what these two guys are doing as they're kind of backing up here. You know, they're keeping moving in some way, shape, or form, and they're both laying down fire superiority, and they're probably just emptied their magazines of all 30 rounds. Demise of BSS, is this a soft unit? Probably not. What we've seen, what I've really noticed is that there is a lot more Western weaponry. And I'm talking about just basic rifles and basic optics for these rifles ongoing through most of the Ukrainian forces at this point. It's not as much. I mean, there's still a lot of AKs and a lot of PKMs and stuff, but I'm seeing a lot of Western weapons. A lot of M4s and M4 carbines and HK 416s and M16 A4s, and I'm seeing just a lot of equipment, a lot of Western equipment. So it's definitely, that is a tactical edge. Artillery and helicopters and aircraft and HIMARS and all this stuff doesn't take ground. You can't take and hold ground. Your basic infantrymen, tanks really don't take and hold ground very well, at least not unsupported. And so they aren't it comes down to your basic infantrymen. And they are getting whatever tactical edge they can. Generally speaking, AK variants have a maximum effective engagement range of about 300-ish meters. And that's including using iron sights or optics. They have a maximum effective point target range of about 300 meters-ish. Regardless of if you're talking about the AK-74 or any of the AK-102, AK-109s, or you're talking about your AK-47 AKM. It really doesn't matter. They have about a maximum range of about 300 meters for a point target. The M4 carbine, M16, HK416s, these all have a point range or a point target range, meaning whatever you're pointing at, you will hit, is what a point target is. If you're aiming down your sight correctly, you will hit that target. They have a maximum effective range of anywhere from about 500 to about 550 meters. And it's even easier if you have optics, an ACOG sight, or an RCO is what I would call it. So you have about 200 meters of much more effective distance. This is why the Marine Corps, for instance, trains to shoot at 500 meters, or 500 yards technically, which is about 453 meters or something. But you train to shoot at 500 meters because that's a maximum point target engagement range. And they have an area effect, meaning that you can put rounds and suppress a target upwards of like 800 plus meters with these weapon systems. It's just effectiveness. Every little advantage you can give your infantrymen. You can increase the range and accuracy of his weapon system. You can make him more accurate by giving him a gun sight. Usually 4-power zoom works just fine. You can give him burst fire mode. Instead of fully automatic, because fully automatic is going to run through a lot more ammo. You give him more magazines. You give him better grenades. You give him anti-tank rockets. You give him night vision. You give him better SAPI plates. You give him more SAPI plates. You give him tactical vests. Every little bit. You give him working tourniquets. So if he does get hit, he will stay alive. Every little advantage over the Russians is multiplied. It stacks. It's a stacking effect. And you see this time and time again in other wars too, where the effectiveness of these weapon systems are proven. This is why by the end of Afghanistan, they were shooting, night vision means more nighttime raids. Thermal optics means that it doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, you're just not good, you can't hide. But by the end of towards the end of Afghanistan, the Taliban wouldn't come within 500 meters of an American installation at all, because they knew that if they got within 500 meters and started shooting, that they would be killed by just your average rifleman on post. He doesn't even need to open up with a machine gun. You just lay down. You just take his rifle and just pop the guy's head off, and then he's done. So we know the effectiveness of this just by historically looking at it, the effectiveness of the weapon systems. Now, going back to the question that I got much earlier in regards to the T90M, and if I can find that here, this is coming from Delta Aviation 23, asked earlier in the stream, what is your opinion on the capture of a T90M? Well, it says a lot, and this is the T90M. Not only was it a T90M, it had all of its covers still on it. This is its camouflage pattern covering, and as well as its rain covering. It's also can be used. This is also basically it can trap and insulate the tank, so it doesn't give off as much of a heat signature. This is Russia's most advanced tank that they have operational. I don't include the T-14 Armada into this category because the T-14 Armada is not an operational system. It's a prototype that is just broken beyond repair and cannot be fielded in any large quantities and numbers. The T-90M is the most modernized version of the T-90 tank that Russia has ever produced. The T-90M is built in 2016. Is when they get these upgrades. Very new. They have the Top Gun on this. It's a 12.7 by 108 millimeter. It's basically the same round as the Dishka, It's also autonomous. The commander does not have to mount onto a gun behind the system. He can operate from inside the vehicle. It's basically a crow system. It has much more upgraded sensors, optics on it. It also has an upgraded, this right here. This is a wind sensor on the T-90. It's a wind and weather sensor. It has an upgrade to that. It has an upgrade to the armor plating. It has an upgrade to the, I want to say it's the sight alignment, I believe. Basically, it has a lot to do with it. And what this tells us, this is abandoned. This is in perfect condition. This is beyond perfect condition. There's nothing wrong with this tank. If anybody at this point in the war says Russia isn't fielding their best stuff, they don't know what the Russian military has in their arsenal. They said that if they say that Russia has not yet fielded their best stuff, they have no idea what is in the Russian military arsenal at all. They don't know Russian doctrine. They don't know Russian military equipment, is what that boils down to. This is their best stuff. This is the best. This has the arena cast close-in air defense system to destroy incoming projectiles. This has all of the SL3 with the unit, meaning that it has all of the stuff needed for it. It's complete. It has all of the spare parts. It has all of the spare covers. It has everything that has been missing. Delta Aviation says it's missing a track. Is it missing a track? It's missing something that can be repaired in the field and is meant to be repaired in the field. This is a perfectly good condition tank. This is the best tank that they could have possibly captured. I wouldn't want to capture a T-14 Armada. It's just a giant wasted hunk of steel. It would be better smelted down and turned into T-34s to fight again. But this thing is worth something, especially to the Russians. It's extremely, extremely expensive to do that modernization. That's why there's not a lot of T-90Ms to begin with. You see mostly T-80s in their forces. This is what the BTGs were all meant to have. So if this is what's being left behind by the Russians, they're done. They are broken. You do not abandon this good of equipment. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. You do not leave your best stuff in the field behind. Leave your T-72 hunk of junk that's been fighting wars 30 years past its debut. Leave whatever. Leave the T-72 that you know you're going to get a replacement for. Leave your BMP-1 that has been fighting wars since long before you were born and your grandfather, fought the Chechens in it in 91. Whatever. And his dad fought the Mujahideen in it too. But this is so beyond. It just blows my mind. An army that is winning doesn't leave this behind. An army that's losing doesn't leave this behind. Delta Aviation says if this was an M1A2, it would be destroyed. The Russians should have destroyed it. If I'm not mistaken, their orders are to destroy it. So, that's the thing. Caffeine says young grandpa. Well, not really. I mean, I know a kid that his grandfather fought in the Gulf War, right? And so I know someone whose grandfather fought in the Gulf War in 91, which is the same time Chechnya is going on. And keep in mind, his dad at this point would have been in like he would have been like 10, 15 at this time. And then his dad fought in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then he, the guy I was with, he was obviously fighting in Operation Inherent Resolve. with me. So, I mean, it's 100% possible. 100%, because I've seen it happen. It's crazy to think that you have 3 generations of people fighting in the same area. But yeah, so Oldie says at least all the secret stuff, such as electronics, would be destroyed. Yeah, I mean, anything secret should be destroyed. You should be destroying clues for a javelin system. You bust out the forward lens cap. You just bust it up as bad as you physically can. Possible, still young. Very, very young. But anyway, moving on. Today's unboxing review comes from Ukraine as well, as we see them unboxing a Russian BMP full of goodies. Take a look. So here they are. They've just captured a fresh Russian BMP. Kick it open. What do we got? Dropping a nade. Oh, look, it's in perfect condition. I mean, it's kind of beat up on the inside, but you know, it's an old vehicle, so that we'll at least give it. Oh, look at all that ammunition. Very nice. Yes. Did I hear Ukraine's getting T-55s? You're getting M55Ss, Delta. They're getting M55Ss. I do not put the M55S in the same category as the T-55. It is 2 completely different tanks. Rooster Cyburn says, looks so small. The BMP is really small. The BMP is actually a pretty small vehicle overall. And that's kind of the point. Fully loaded carousel too. Weird it's not full of trash. This must have been from the new brigade that got there. Actually, we know it is, because it's the triangle logo with the Z in it. But the T-55 and all Russian vehicles are known for having a low profile. The reason for that is because Russian vehicles, the T-Series, the BMPs, the BMDs, the BTRs, all of this stuff has a low profile because it was meant to fight on the Russian steppe should a war between NATO and the Soviet Union break out. And so the ideology is that at the time of these tanks and vehicles design, these vehicles were meant to fight. The biggest danger to them on the battlefield is another tank. It's another armored vehicle. Now, the steppes of Russia are rather open. And the T-Series, especially, this is a lot easier to explain with just the T-Series tanks, the main battle tanks, but you can scale it down to the BMPs and whatever else you want. The T-Series tanks, they have a low profile because it's harder to hit a smaller target with a main tank gun. And generally speaking, NATO tanks have a pretty high profile. They have a pretty big profile for what they are. And that's the same ideology as to why there's an auto-rotating carousel in these things, which seems like a weakness when you're talking about hitting it with a javelin, but the forethought is there. The thought is there into why it has these things. That auto-rotating carousel can fire up to 9 rounds a minute out of the main tank gun. It can fire up to 9 main tank gun rounds, 120 millimeter rounds, through the main tank gun a minute. That is how fast the auto-rotating carousel can go. And these tanks, once again, were designed to fight in a war against NATO. It's a lower profile vehicle, making it a harder target to hit. They can produce a lot more of them. They can produce an eye-watering number of them, especially the T-72, which is the real mainstay of the Russian army. And they can put them all there. They can outnumber the enemy. They can outnumber NATO tanks. It takes less crew to crew these tanks because of the auto-rotating carousel, and they have a higher rate of fire than NATO tanks. So they can put a lot of hate and discontent downrange, and they're a harder target to hit. The idea wasn't the idea isn't the war it's fighting now. These are designed perfectly for the war that was meant to be fought 50 years ago. They're not very well designed for the war that they're fighting now. And that is just kind of the fact of reality. But Russia has what Russia has. They haven't been able to. Their newest tank is the T-14 Armada. They can't produce it in enough numbers, and it's just not good. It's just not good. It does not have enough. It doesn't have enough power behind it. Delta Aviation says is M55 based on the T-55. Okay, so Delta Aviation is kind of going backwards a little bit. So the M55 is a T-55, technically speaking. It has the same chassis, but Slovenia, which is the ones that actually put the T-50 or put the M55 S1 together, is extremely upgraded. I mean, but all you need is a 19-year-old private with a strong arm for an Abrams. Yeah, but that's a 4-man crew. A 4-man crew is a lot harder to train than 3-man crew, especially when one of them doesn't have to load the thing continuously, and you can field more tanks. Where is it at? I think it might be this one. No, is it this one? It is this one. Okay. So anyway, this is the M55S. So if you take a look here, that's a T-55. You know it's a T-55. Take a look at the road wheels. You have a set of 4, and then you have a giant space, and then 1 here in the front. And that's not including the drive and rear sprockets. This is a T-55. 100% it's a T-55. The thing is that Slovenia did a massive amount of upgrades to the M55, and it really isn't a T-55 anymore. It's really just one by name. They really took the T-55, which is really outdated, and they completely upgraded it to the point that it really doesn't need... It's as close as a tank is going to get to being an Abrams or a Leopard or a Leclerc or anything without being an Abrams or a Leclerc or anything. So that's the M55S1. That's what that picture was, an M55S1. I don't know if they have any other variants. I just know it's the M55S1. I don't think they have an S2 or S3 yet, but I could be wrong. They're getting 28 of them, and Slovenia only has like 51 of the damn thing. So they're pretty much giving up the majority of their armored force to Ukraine, which for Slovenia is kind of a big deal. We go over here, and we see partisan attacks. They attacked yet another official here inside of Melitopol, this time in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. They're very active in the Melitopol region. We've seen that quite a bit, but this time they attacked the State Bureau of Investigation of the People's Militia in Melitopol. It's not known whether or not the collaborator was killed, but we do have some footage coming out from the aftermath of this attack. Take a look. Garnering some successes there. Unfortunately, Nikopol was once again shelled. 2 people were killed and 3 were wounded in the Russian shelling. Quote, rocket attacks in Nikopol district in Dnipropetrovsk region on September the 18th. 2 men were killed. 2 men and a woman were injured. Local residential buildings were damaged. And that's coming from Valentin Reznichenko, the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration. We also know that another UAV was downed, according to the Operational Command South here in the Kherson region, as of September the 17th. So another UAV was shot down by Ukrainian forces there. Reportedly, there was one downed in Mykolaiv as well today, but couldn't get enough clarification on that. And a big news story of the night here is that a Russian missile landed within 300 meters of a nuclear power plant. This is the South Ukraine nuclear power plant located in Yuzhno-Krinsk in the Mykolaiv Oblast. It's the second largest power plant in Ukraine, being probably pretty close to the second largest in Europe, considering the largest one is also in Ukraine. And it landed within 300 meters within the compound. In fact, quote, Russian aggressors fired Russian aggressors shelled South Ukraine nuclear power plant. The missile landed 300 meters away from the nuclear reactors. The shockwave damages the nuclear power plant buildings, and over 100 windows were broken out. This is coming from the National Nuclear Energy Generating Company of Ukraine. Since the IAEA are now at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it's only right that they have to move on to the next one where they're not at, right? Take a look at this. This is the footage coming from the nuclear power plant. Why? Most Russian ballistic missiles have an accuracy of within about 500 meters of their intended target. This is like 300 meters outside of the nuclear power plant. You know what that means? More than likely, this means that Russia was targeting the nuclear facility. Think about that. They're only accurate within about 500 meters. That means that they're probably targeting the nuclear facility itself because, take a look here. That's the nuclear facility. See, it's not like Enhedar. It's not like Enhedar, where if you go to Enhedar, right, you can jump over here. See, it's right next to the city. I mean, right next to it. But if you go over here, what you end up seeing is it's a kilometer until you get to the city. You know, kilometer and a half, depending on which way you go. Right? And you know what? This didn't land. I mean, you're talking about it landed, what did they say, 300 meters from the reactors. So it landed about here-ish. Somewhere in kind of this area, this general vicinity. So that means that this is the target. This is the target. There is no question about whether or not this is the target. This is nuclear terrorism. I 100% agree with Ukrainian on that. I really do. That's nuclear terrorism. This is willing to commit the largest nuclear catastrophe in human history. For some minor land gains. Potentially, depending on the wind, irradiating your land gains. And most of Europe. At least a large chunk of it. Think about that. What country in their right mind would think that's a great idea? Because if the wrong wind shift happens, it blows into Russia. It blows into where they're trying to make land gains. It blows into Crimea. This is nuclear terrorism. You cannot say, based off of accuracy of Russian weapon systems, based off the trajectory, based off of where it landed, based off of the major targets in this area, you cannot say that this is not the intended target. It's impossible. So jump over here to Odessa. Further monopoly of the world's grain supply. Yeah. We see that the grain corridor continues to see loaded ships, though. Quote, on September the 18th, 8 more ships with agricultural products left Ukrainian ports Odessa, ShamRocks, and Pevdeny through the grain corridor, and it's coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. So we are seeing more ships leaving through the grain corridor and continuing to move. It seems that that is still being a successful route and kind of starting to alleviate some of the pressure there. But that's actually it for everything inside the country of Ukraine. Don't worry, we got plenty of other stuff outside the country of Ukraine too. And the first thing that we start off with, of course, is, you guessed it, Russia. So as we jump up here into Moscow, what we see is the truth has started to come out. Popular Russian propagandist Olga Skabayev says that the American weapons are great until recently Russian propaganda has denied technological supremacy of Western weaponry.
Я не знаю, вы как хотите. Нас народ смотрит, мы к нему должны относиться уважительно. Они ждут от нас правды. Оружие у американцев нормальное. Блок североатлантический сильный. Навалились они на нас всем западным миром. Там полно специалистов. У этих специалистов отлично получилось сработать в Харьковской области. Не надо говорить, что оружие так себе. Надо еще раз двигаться вперед. Понимать, что ставки очень высокие. Но правда все равно нужна людям. Людям нужна правда. Не надо рассуждать на тему того, что американские хаймерсы не представляют угрозы. Представляют. Я не знаю, вы как хотите.
So the truth begins to come out. They are. It was wonderfully orchestrated. Their weapons are really good. It is a threat. But they're going to spin this, and they're going to spin it towards, so we need to, and so the spin is, we need to begin war with somebody else. We need to broaden the war. This is also coming, of course, as Soloviev calls for the on-the-spot tribunals for deserters and traitors.
Должны быть военно-полевые суды по отношению к предателям и дезертирам, если такие есть, по отношению к тем, кто не выполняет свой воинский долг, по отношению к тем, кто вдруг испугался. Это же война с НАТО.
Да.
И надо проявлять силу и волю. И надо учитывать, какие против нас силы и средства использованы, и, соответственно, отвечать. Исходя из военной науки, как правильно говорят приходящие нам товарищи генералы, война – это строгая математика. Значит, надо считать. Значит, необходимо брать. И когда вдруг кто-то из высокопоставленных относительно чиновников говорит, что у нас прекрасные, лучшие в мире беспилотники, возникает вопрос, ну так и где они в промышленном количестве? А если человек это сказал, то изволь предоставить, либо пояснить, чтобы не сеять разные чувства. И хочу напомнить, что была и армия Власова из предателей. И с ней боролись. Но просто когда мы говорим о жесткости, вот чтобы...
So that's about as much Russian media as I can physically stand without getting sick. It says, you know, we need to kill on-the-spot tribunals when there need to be court-martials, traitors, and deserters who fail to fulfill their duty. Now, for those who suddenly got scared, these propagandists should be volunteers. I know. Have they used their best drones yet? You know, they've used their best everything, Rooster. If they had anything better, they would have fielded it by now, but they don't. And it would have been blown up in the first 3 months of the war anyway. Anyway, they say here that for those who suddenly got scared, this is very bold talk coming from a fat man in Russia that his hair's graying and he probably didn't even get his chance to fight in the Soviet Union against, I don't know, the Mujahideen. Think about that. This man has probably never fought in a war, probably has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. suddenly got scared. If you're... People that aren't scared end up two ways in war. They're either crazy or they're dead. Being scared keeps you alive. These guys are called chicken hawks. Also, this is a war against NATO. You're losing a war against NATO, and NATO hasn't shown up yet. I'm impressed, personally. It's all about math, not entirely. You should have some kind of understanding. Quality... It's a quote attributed to Stalin, even though no one actually knows if Stalin said it. But reportedly, Stalin said quantity has a quality all of its own. It's not about math. I mean, it's not about math. There's math involved, but it's not all about math. It doesn't matter how many people you keep throwing at the problem. If they immediately get slaughtered, then you're just wasting your most precious resource, which is people. A country's most important resource isn't money, isn't steel, uranium, gas, or oil, or any of that. It's not any of that. That is not the most important resource of any nation in the world. It's people. People are the most important resource. Who drills the oil? Who cultivates the food? Who builds the tanks? And then who crews the tanks? Who fights the wars? Who budgets? People. People are the most important resource of any nation on the planet. This is why it's important to take care of everybody. Because overall, the planet's the most important resource is also people. How else are we going to plan on making it as an interplanetary species? Or an intergalactic species? As there's also a possibility of us. Still, there's a small window, but we could also go to different galaxy groups. Charlton Brooks says they can't bring themselves to admit that they're losing against Ukraine. It's got to be the whole of NATO. I know NATO has just rolled all of our Abrams tanks and Leopards and the Clerks, and we've just brought in all of our F-16s and F-15s, and we have 4 aircraft carrier groups parked off the coast of Russia, and we're just gonna bomb the hell out of them, aren't we? We're just bombing the hell out of them. It's not how war works, guys. I hate to break it to you. They're not fighting all of NATO. They're fighting Ukraine and losing, and NATO's helping Ukraine. And we're not even helping them that much. Like, we're helping them a lot, but ultimately, could we throw in a lot more? I bet we could throw in a lot. If nobody here cared about the minimum defense requirement because they weren't worried at all about what Russia could do, Ukraine be rolling around with like Leopard 2s everywhere. Just would be crushing Russian troops under the treads. Yeah, not one, Rooster Sideburns puts it best, not one NATO boot on the ground and they're defeating Russia. I know. Russia's losing a war against NATO and NATO didn't even show up yet. But that's okay because Ukraine's also hacking the Russians here. In a cruel twist of fate. So Russia has been one of the scariest things about Russia that they thought was going to happen is the hybrid warfare. And one of that is on the digital spectrum. Russia did a little trickery, but Ukraine's been doing quite a bit themselves, and the Ukrainian IT forces hacked the Wagner groups, the private military corporations, recruitment website, and they have now Ukrainians have all of the personal information of the new recruits, and the digital transformation, and this is all coming from the digital transformation minister of Ukraine. Very well done. Estonia is going to be training Ukrainian troops. Quote, Estonia helps with the training of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Thank you for your support. And this is coming from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So Estonia joining in there on training Ukrainian forces on how to operate these weapon systems. Lay down some more hate, discontent downrange. That's not the only big thing coming out of the Baltics. The Baltics actually banned Russian tourists. So countries joining a ban of Russian tourists from visiting their countries. The ban also applies for Russians granted EU visas by other states. Through Finland, though Finland has promised to join the ban, they still have not implemented it, arguing it may be against the laws of the EU. If you can get more information, you can come over here and jump onto Reuters, who have a wonderful article regarding that. Over here in Leicester, many people were arrested during this order. A number of calls came into Leicester police on Saturday reporting about 200 people had gathered in the east of the city for an unauthorized protest. All available local officers were sent to the scene, tried to calm those who had gathered, while extra police resources were drafted in. 2 men were arrested after Saturday's disorder, one on suspicion of conspiracy to commit violent disorder, and another on suspicion of possession of a bladed article. Another protest involved about 100 people followed on Sunday. A further 18 people were arrested on Sunday night for offenses including affray, common assault, possession of an offensive weapon, and violent disorder.
We're on Nelson Road right now. Stand up with the Hindu mob. As you can see, look, they're throwing glass. They're throwing glass at us. They're throwing glass at us. They're throwing missiles. Wow, nearly got the police officer on the head. This is what the Hindu mobs are throwing. The Hindu mobs are throwing bottles in our direction. Look, again, another one. Wow. They're facing the wrong way. They're facing the wrong way. Look, another missile. Another missile. Another missile. This is what the Hindu mobs are doing. They're throwing glass balls at the Muslims down here. Police have got nothing under control. First they came, look, another one. Another one. Another one.
And they did end up releasing a statement on that. So. And of course, unfortunately, today was the day in which over here in Westminster Abbey that Queen Elizabeth II's funeral was officially held. The royal family, global politicians, and heads of state and the public paid their respects today to Queen Elizabeth II as her funeral was held once again there at Westminster Abbey. These are some photos coming from the official Twitter of the royal family. And so the Queen is will be finally laid to rest there today. And with that, we begin our move down and into the Middle East, where we've had several different developments over the last 48 hours. First of all, as we jump up here, this is over in the up in the northern part of Syria here along the Turkish borders, where the Turkish forces struck PKK positions. The Turkish Air Force launched airstrikes and positions of the PKK and the Syrian army in the village of Karamuk and Jashir in the Kobani region, reporting many dead and wounded as a result of the raid. And so you can see the results of some of these strikes here. There you get some aerial footage of some of these strikes. And as we move down here into Deir ez-Zor province, we see here, this is over in the Umar oil fields and the Conoco gas plant area, where where reportedly some unknown militants attempted to fire 107 millimeter rockets at an American outpost there in the Umar oil fields, and they ended up falling short. So the shells did not reach their targets. A fourth shell was found in a remaining launcher roughly 5 kilometers from the U.S. garrison. And this is coming from the Central Command. Approximately 7:05 p.m. in Syria on September the 18th, a rocket attack targeting Green Village base in northeast Syria failed to strike U.S. or coalition forces or equipment. 307 millimeter rockets targeted the base. A fourth rocket, along with rocket tubes, was found at the launch point approximately 5 kilometers away. U.S. forces in northeast Syria are investigating the incident. No, I will not disclose where Green Village is exactly, considering it's obviously still active. And over here in Tehran, we have an interesting development. Mass protests are going on over the mandatory hijab rules. 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini died in the hospital after being detained and beaten by Iranian morality police in Tehran over wearing improper hijab. Iran International obtained her CT scan from the hospital, which showed presence of secretions of blood in her lungs and a skull fracture on the right side of her head with complications that might have been caused by a direct blow to the skull. Protesters, men and women, young and old, in Tehran and western Iran went to the streets, burned the hijab, burned the Iranian flag, and called for the immediate termination of the Islamic Republic. The Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and mandatory hijab law. 4 protesters were reported dead and many were wounded after clashes with police. Protesters in Tehran and Rasht continued in the dark. Authorities expressed sympathy with Ms. Amini's family, but denied having caused her injury. So this is some of the CT scan footage, and you can see some of those blood secretions. So what this has really kicked off here is quite significantly, it's really gone into violence pretty quickly. Take a look.
بچه های مردم رو میزنید. برید عقب، بنزین داره توش. برید عقب، بنزین توشه میتره که الان. میکشم هران که خواهرم کش. میکشم هران که خواهرم کش. اینا خرابتتونه. میگه آموزهای بی طرف.
But yes, the situation has quite quickly devolved into violence.
آره گیر کرده.
جمهوری اسلامی
once again, protests ongoing across Iran. And as we jump over here, we have an update between Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan regarding some casualties. At the moment, Kyrgyzstan has officially recognized the death of 59 people among the military and civilians, as well as the wounding of another 144 people. Tajikistan admitted to more than 60 people killed, mostly among civilians. As we move further east here, we end up in Taiwan once again, where it would appear that an additional earthquake hit the exact same area as it did on Saturday. What we end up here is a subsequent earthquake with a magnitude of 6.8 on the Richter scale and at depths of 7 kilometers under southeastern Taiwan. Occurred at about 2:44 p.m. local time yesterday, following the 6.5 earthquake that ended up hitting the city on the day prior, Saturday. Several bridges collapsed or were damaged, a train derailed, several buildings including schools collapsed. One death has been reported thus far. The Central West Bureau instructs civilians to be vigilant for the presence of frequent aftershocks.
Elementary.
So we're not going to go ahead and show but elementary schools and everything else have just been completely collapsed. And this is the second one in 2 days here for the country of Taiwan. So jump down here and into Africa, we have a couple of different developments. The first one is that Al-Shabaab militants say that they are ready for war. Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab propagandists released a 30-minute video of over 100 training camp graduates joining the ITO. In addition, the representatives of the group, Ali Mohammed Raj, made a speech in front of the fighters on the video, declaring that they are ready for war. Declared by the president of Somalia and ordered the residents to stay home, stay away from hotels, military, and other government facilities, which would most likely be targets of jihadist attack. Once again, these terrorist organizations have quite a bit of backing in these regions. They really, they have quite a few people in their following. These terrorist organizations in this region are significantly better prepared than a lot of other places. They just don't come up against the same opposition. They have an immense backing, and it's a lot easier for them to get weapons and munitions, and they're fighting against a force that is very similar in capability to them. They are very similar in capability to whatever the military can throw at them, and we've seen them have successes and losses pretty much on equal footing across the majority of Africa. During a counterterrorism operation, however, in the province of Iran, Somalia, the military personnel of the country's armed forces killed more than 70 militants of the Al-Shabaab group, which once again is associated with Al-Qaeda, and settlements that they had previously captured. And you can see that they are recapturing a lot of equipment. Over here in Niger, we're seeing that hundreds of people are protesting against the presence of French troops in the country. Hundreds of people took to the streets to protest against the presence of the French armed forces within the country of Niger. The protests demanded the immediate withdrawal of foreign troops from the territory of the state in order to be free as a people of Mali. According to the protesters, Russia played an important role in the withdrawal of the French military, to which the residents who came to the rally expressed their gratitude. Remember that for many of these countries, they were under colonialism until not but just a few decades ago, as colonialism really ended during the mid to late end of the 20th century. So there is quite a bit of understanding as to why they would feel this way, considering most of this region was under French colonial control clear up into the end of the Second World War. And so French troops coming back kind of feels like a continuation of that. Mr. Cyburn says, who feels threatened by French troops? Well, if you saw what the French did in Mali, there'd be some reason to fear. The French really did a number to the militants in Mali when they were called to assist, and they rapidly deployed. It was very impressive. And with the theme of there's been several pretty big things natural disaster-wise that has occurred in the world. And today, as I was actually at work, I keep track of weather and I keep track of the National Hurricane Center. And what we ended up finding today is that Hurricane Fiona. So there was a tropical depression that got upgraded into a hurricane, and it grew pretty rapidly in strength as it approached past the Leeward Islands. It ended up slamming into Hispaniola and Puerto Rico today, and that's Hurricane Fiona is the name. Puerto Rican Governor Pedro Pierluisi said that Hurricane Fiona has caused catastrophic destruction in urban areas, killing at least 2 people and leaving nearly the entire country or the entire island without power. Downpours capable of producing flash floods were expected to continue well into Tuesday. So coming up here, the governor estimates that there is billions of dollars worth of damage. Pierluisi said that he had been in touch with the President Biden and the government leaders of New York, New Jersey, and California to coordinate assistance with the recovery. National Guard has activated 600 soldiers throughout Puerto Rico in rescue operations. Emergency responders have rescued around 1,000 people. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, Chief Deanne Criswell is expected to travel to Puerto Rico on Tuesday to meet with state and local officials as well as citizens and to assess urgent needs. Wow. I've never seen a bridge get twisted like a pretzel quite like that. But as we can move over here and into Mexico, there has been some volcanic activity for about the last week here in western Mexico. However, it would appear that the more major incident occurred over the weekend while we're on break here. A magnitude 7.6 earthquake hit western Mexico near La Placita de Morelos in western Mexico at a depth of 15 kilometers or 9.3 miles. The U.S. tsunami warning system said there was a risk of a tsunami near the coast of Michoacan. According to the Tsunami Warning Center, waves of up to 3 meters were possible. One person so far has been confirmed dead after a wall at one of the malls in Manzanillo ended up collapsing. The threat of tsunami passed as of 11:13 p.m. That would appear to be UTC, or 7:13 p.m. Eastern Time. And we can see that official tsunami warning here. By the way, this was also submitted by our viewer, Speedy, who ended up sending this in to us. So, thank you very much. But that is most of the heavy hitting news. But with that, we get ready to move into kind of the interesting stuff. We always here on the channel, we want to kind of end the night on kind of a much more kind of interesting or uplifting note a little bit, just because of all the depressing stuff that we're seeing throughout the day. But what we end up seeing here is the first ever flying bike was showcased at a Detroit auto show. The Japanese startup designed a high-speed flying motorcycle that has showcased the Detroit auto show. Exturismo hover bike is capable of flying for 40 minutes and reaching speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles per hour. Thad Zott, the co-chair of Motor City's auto show, was one of the first to take a test drive and it has nothing but great reviews for it. Their hover bike is already on sale in Japan, and a smaller version will be available in the U.S. in 2023 for $777,000. Or 775,400 euros. Shia Komatsu, the company's CEO, said the company hopes to get the cost down to $50,000 or 49,890 euros for a smaller electric model by 2025. Rich Cyber says Star Wars had those. Yes, I know, right? It's just a speeder bike. So it's a prototype of a speeder. By the way, What license do you have to own one of these things? Aside from being a millionaire, and then quickly no longer being a millionaire. But how much do you have to have? Like what do you have to have? Like, is this a pilot's license? Is this like a motorcycle's license? Like, what license is this? Like an FAA thing, or is this like a BMV kind of thing? I don't know which one that falls under, or is it both? Do you consider this a drone? Can I take this to the airport? Like, what does this require license-wise to take this out in public? Because I'm sure you can't just take that down the. I'm sure you can't just take that down the highway. I mean, technically you could, I guess. It's going 62 miles an hour, but I mean, would you want to? I can't see myself just looking over while I'm driving down the highway somewhere and going, "Whoa, wow, would you look at that? There's a guy flying next to me on his motorcycle." The future of house cleaning. So you come over here into Gaza. A Palestinian man ended up discovering a Byzantine-era mosaic in his backyard. After 3 months of excavating it with his son, they finally get the first glimpse. The condition of the mosaic is absolutely incredible, and it would have been sitting here since between the 4th and the 7th centuries, following the fall of Rome during the Byzantine Empire. That is absolutely beautiful. So very, very well preserved. Nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do ads here on this channel. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So there's a mind-boggling amount of history in this one just part of the world. Just a mind-boggling amount of history. Because you have so many empires that have risen and fallen and claimed Jerusalem. You have the Crusades, you have the Assyrians, you have Mesopotamia, you have the Byzantine Empire, you have Rome, you have the Egyptians, you have the Greeks, the Phoenicians, you have all sorts of... You have Carthage. I mean, you have so much history in this one area. It is just insane. The Mediterranean as a historical place. I would love to go to here just for the history. Just for the history. It is amazing. The kind of history that's here. Sumerian, yeah, I mean, I just can't list them all. I don't know them all off the top of my head. It's just, there's so many groups that have formed here and have huge history. I mean, it's insane to think about. But that is actually all of the news in the world, all the major news in the world over the last 48 hours here on the New News. Quite a bit. Quite a bit of stuff is happening. Quite a bit of things happening that could have really big geopolitical consequences. Of course, there's a lot happening inside the country of Ukraine. And a lot of it is kind of depressing. I mean, we have, not one but two earthquakes and a giant catastrophic hurricane that just slammed into Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. It is continuing to ravage across the Pacific because it's only going to gain strength it's going to lose strength as it hits land, but it's going to gain strength as it gets over open water as long as it keeps rotation. So, I mean, this stuff's not over. And Mexico also is having a volcanic eruption in western Mexico too. Just not a whole lot of information that we have on that. It's been going on for, I guess, about a week. Nothing major yet, but generally speaking, there's a lot of bad stuff happening, right? I think that's something we can all agree on. Luckily, we can all be able to give a little bit back. If we go and check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there, and all of them are there to help. And if you have any others, please get onto our Discord. The link's also in the description. And please, send a message to any of us in a private message. Send them to us about send a message to us about those organizations that you might have, and ask us and let us know, and send us the link for them, tell us what they do, and we'll hopefully be able to get it added to the stream like we are right now. We're working on getting several more added, and that way we can hopefully get more money raised to help more people. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this thing, help us keep help us keep doing more good. If you like what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and the more people that come here, the more of an impact we'll have. So please give us a like, subscribe, let your friends know about us. You can follow us on social media, join our Discord community. There's a ton of awesome stuff that gets done down there. Seth from Melt actually has a last minute question, and he retracted it, but he asked, what is the likelihood that Putin gets removed from power? And that's in regards to the war in Ukraine. Well, the likelihood is meh. It wouldn't be soon. But in the words of one of his former ministers of foreign affairs, he said that the Russian people have a history of not telling guys that they screwed up. They normally just kill them first. And that's pretty true. If you talk about the Tsar, if you talk about the Soviet Union, there are the Mensheviks before you get the Bolsheviks during the Soviet Union. They have a history of you don't get to. Yeah, they get. I'm trying to think here. They don't really tell people that they're wrong. They just get rid of them. They just overthrow them. And we're kind of starting to see some of the cracks form in Russia. I mean, there's already a movement. There's been a movement for some time for the Free Russians, and that really got spearheaded by people very early on, Russians living outside of the country of Russia, that were living in Western Europe and were traveling abroad and saw what was happening. And then that was picked up by resistance inside of the country. We know that there's small armed resistance in some places. There was a video posted about that not very long ago, or that was posted months ago, I should say. And we also know that the Russian State Duma just received 2 bills on breaking up the Russian Federation. They received 2 bills submitted by members of government. And we also know that in St. Petersburg and Moscow, up to 17 different representatives signed something saying that he should be tried for treason or removed from power. So there is a movement. But the authoritarian grip really doesn't mean that 17 people are going to get their way. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of politicians. But in an authoritarian government, it's not how that works. And he's going to snuff them out. They're being tried for treason, some of them. And could probably go to jail, where they may or may not disappear, or they may or may not end up falling out of their hospital window or off the back of their boat in the, Far East. So there's, obviously some cracks that have formed. There's some stuff that's going on. I do not believe that Putin will lose his grip on power immediately. If there's one thing that people like more than achieving their objectives, whether that be killing an entire group of people or what have you, then it's keeping themselves in power. And you see this I saw this when the Iranians were firing missiles at, Al-Assad Air Base. They didn't hit anything important. They hit a bunch of empty hangars. They gave some people some concussions, I guess. And then they really didn't do anything. They didn't cause any casualties. But it's because after we killed al-Soleimani, they had to respond some way. and they knew that attacking someplace, or they knew that actually attacking and killing Americans is a quick way to lose their power, and the Ayatollah really does not want to do that. So they will do it in more deceptive ways. I say deceptive, like we don't know that we knew there were 70,000 Iranian fighters in Syria, but they'll do it more deceptive ways. Likewise, Russia isn't going to directly attack a NATO power, more than likely. And so NATO and Russia will never directly probably enter a conflict unless there's like nuclear weapons exchange inside of Ukraine. So it's yeah. So I don't think he's going to get removed from power, though. I don't think he'll be liquidated before he's removed from power, I think. But that's probably some far future stuff. I don't the cracks are there, but they're not far along enough to really cause the divide yet, I don't think. So, but until then, we'll keep monitoring the situation. And until then, please continue helping us be the news that gives back. It's a very good question, though. It's a very thoughtful one. But please continue helping us be the news that gives back, and keep, if you like what we're trying to do here, please help us, grow this thing. I mean, the more people that are here, the more of an impact we'll have. The more good we'll be able to do. We'll never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising or anything like that. Everything that we do is to help people. And 100% of everything we're doing is for charity. So if you like what we're trying to do here, we'll hopefully be able to grow this together and do some amazing stuff. Now, we are getting ready to do some videos and stuff too. And doing some other content for you guys. So if you guys have any ideas as to what you would like to, or what you would like us to do and talk about in some a little bit more in-depth topics, whether that be historical, military, what have you, please leave a comment in the description, or please leave a comment on the video and kind of tell us, hey, this is kind of something I think would be good. I'm looking for any and all open suggestions. I'm kind of interested in see what you guys think would be an interesting topic to hear me talk about for some time. So please leave a comment, and hopefully we'll see you back here on Wednesday for another 48 hours in review at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe, and if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. In the meantime, have a fantastic night and a fantastic Tuesday, everybody. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic, fantastic rest of your night. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Помним всіх вас, хто змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у волновах, і чудно кличе, Идите нахуй!